I still remember the exact moment my perfect life shattered into a million pieces. It wasn't in the privacy of our bedroom, or even during a quiet conversation over coffee. No, my husband chose to humiliate me in front of 57 shareholders, 3 board members, and a room full of tech journalists. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Maya, and I'm 29 years old. 3 years ago, I married Derek Chen, the charismatic founder and CEO of Next Gen Solutions, a cutting-edge smart home technology company based in San Francisco. I was 26, fresh off a successful campaign that had tripled user engagement for a major retail brand. Derek was 42, brilliant, ambitious, and completely swept me off my feet. Our courtship was a whirlwind. He pursued me relentlessly after we met at a tech conference where I was presenting on millennial marketing strategies. Within 6 months, we were engaged. Within a year, I was standing in a gorgeous garden venue in Napa Valley, promising to love him forever. I thought I knew what I was signing up for. The long hours, the constant travel, the pressure of being married to someone in the public eye. What I didn't know was that I was signing up to be a prop in someone else's carefully constructed image. The first year was good. Great, even. I moved into Derek's stunning modern home in Pacific Heights, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, and enough smart home technology to make me feel like I was living in the future. I kept my job as marketing director at a mid-sized firm, maintaining my independence even as I settled into married life. We talked about children, of course. Derek said he wanted them eventually. When I mentioned wanting to start trying after our first anniversary, he'd kiss my forehead and say, "Let's wait until the Series C funding closes. Or maybe after the product launch." There was always a reason to wait. I didn't push. I understood the pressure he was under. NextGen was his baby before I ever came into the picture, and I respected that. Around our second anniversary, I started noticing changes. Derek became distant, distracted. He'd come home late, smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't mine. When I asked about his day, he'd give me one-word answers before disappearing into his home office. "The company's expanding," he'd say. "There's a lot on my plate." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? I'd seen the press releases, the new partnerships, the office expansion. NextGen was growing rapidly, and Derek was at the helm of it all. Then came the morning that changed everything. It was a Thursday in October. I was getting ready for work when I felt a sharp pain in my lower abdomen. I'd been experiencing irregular periods for months, along with some weight gain I couldn't explain despite my regular gym routine. I'd been putting off seeing a doctor, telling myself I was just stressed. But that morning, the pain was bad enough that I called my gynecologist and managed to get a same-day appointment. Dr. Sarah Lynn had been my doctor for 5 years. She was thorough, compassionate, and direct. After an ultrasound and some blood work, she sat me down in her office. "Maya, you have polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS. I felt my stomach drop. What does that mean? It means your hormones are out of balance, which is causing irregular periods, the weight gain, and some other symptoms you've been experiencing. It can also make getting pregnant more challenging, but not impossible. With treatment and lifestyle changes, many women with PCOS conceive naturally, and there are always other options if needed." I nodded, trying to process the information. "Should I tell my husband?" Dr. Lynn smiled gently. "That's up to you, but yes, if you're planning to try for children, he should know, so he can support you through treatment." I drove home in a daze. That evening, I waited for Derek to come home, planning to tell him everything. But he didn't come home until after midnight, and when he did, he went straight to the guest room, claiming he didn't want to wake me with an early morning call. I didn't tell him that night. Or the next. The moment never seemed right. 2 weeks later, Derek asked me to attend the quarterly shareholder meeting. This was unusual. He typically kept me separate from his business dealings, saying he wanted to protect me from the stress and politics of the corporate world. "I'd really like you there," he said over breakfast. "It would mean a lot to me." I should have known something was wrong, but I was foolishly touched by what I thought was him wanting to include me more in his life. I wore my best Navy suit and sat in the third row of the conference room at NextGen's headquarters. The meeting started normally enough. Financial reports, product updates, growth projections. Derek was in his element, commanding the room with his usual confidence. Then, during the Q&A session, everything fell apart. One of the board members, Richard Morrison, stood up. "Derek, I think we need to address the elephant in the room." There are concerns among the investors about leadership succession. You're not getting any younger, and you don't have an heir apparent, either in the company or—" He paused meaningfully. "Personally." I felt my cheeks burn. Were they seriously discussing our private life in a shareholder meeting? Derek's expression remained neutral. "Richard, I appreciate the concern, but my personal life isn't—" "It is when it affects investor confidence," Richard interrupted. "You sold us on the vision of a family legacy company. Where's the family?" The room went silent. I could feel dozens of eyes turning toward me. Then Derek said something that made my blood run cold. "I've been trying to build that family, Richard. But unfortunately, my wife is unable to have children." The room erupted in whispers. I sat frozen, unable to breathe. He'd just announced my private medical condition to a room full of strangers. He'd just humiliated me in the most public way possible. But he wasn't done. "I've recently learned that Maya has been hiding a medical condition from me since before our marriage. A condition that makes natural conception nearly impossible. If I had known, I—" He trailed off, shaking his head sadly as if he were the victim here. I stood up, my legs shaking. Every eye in the room was on me. "That's not true," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Derek looked at me with something like pity. "Maya, please, don't make this harder than it already is." I walked out of that conference room with whatever dignity I had left. I made it to the parking garage before I broke down completely, sitting in my car and sobbing until I couldn't breathe. When I finally composed myself enough to drive home, I found Derek already there, packing a bag. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I think it's best if I stay at the office for a while. Give us both some space to think." "Think about what? You just humiliated me in front of your entire company." He had the audacity to look hurt. "I humiliated you? Maya, you've been lying to me about your ability to have children. Do you know how that makes me look? The investors are already questioning my judgment. I wasn't lying. I only found out 2 weeks ago, and I was trying to find the right time to tell you." 2 weeks? His eyes narrowed. "You've known for 2 weeks and said nothing? You've barely been home. When was I supposed to tell you? When you come in at midnight and go straight to the guest room." He grabbed his bag and headed for the door. "My lawyer will be in touch." "Your lawyer?" "Derek." Wait. But he was already gone. The next 48 hours were a blur. I called in sick to work. I couldn't eat, could barely sleep. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends and colleagues who'd heard about the shareholder meeting disaster. The tech blogs were already running stories. Next-gen CEO's marriage troubles surface at shareholder meeting. On Saturday morning, a courier delivered Divert's papers. I sat on my kitchen floor, reading through the document with growing horror. Derek wasn't just divorcing me. He was invoking a clause in our prenuptial agreement that I'd barely paid attention to when we signed it, too in love and trusting to scrutinize the details. The clause stated that if either party concealed a material medical condition that affected the primary marital purpose of procreation, the marriage could be annulled, and the concealing party would receive nothing. Not the house, not a settlement, nothing. He was trying to paint me as a liar who'd trapped him in a fraudulent marriage. And if he succeeded, I'd be left with nothing after 3 years of supporting his career, hosting his business dinners, and playing the perfect CEO's wife. I called the only lawyer I knew personally, Jennifer Park, who I'd met through a women's professional networking group. "Maya," she said when she arrived at my house that afternoon, her expression grave after reading the papers. "This is serious. If he can prove you deliberately concealed your PCOS diagnosis before marriage, he might actually win this. But I didn't even know before marriage. I just found out 2 weeks ago. Do you have proof of that?" "My medical records. I can get them from Dr. Lin." Jennifer nodded. "Good. We'll need those. But Maya, I have to ask, why is he doing this? This seems extreme even for a bad divorce." I shook my head. "I don't know. Unless—" A horrible thought occurred to me. Unless he's been planning this. Unless he never wanted children with me at all. Over the next few weeks, as I prepared for court, pieces started falling into place. My lawyer's investigator discovered that Derek had hired Amber Hayes, a 24-year-old social media coordinator, 8 months ago. Friends started coming forward with sightings of Derek and Amber at restaurants, leaving hotels together. But the worst discovery came from Derek's executive assistant, Monica, who'd worked for him for 10 years. She called me privately, her voice shaking. "Mrs. Chen, I can't stay silent anymore. Derek told me to book a hotel room downtown twice a week for the past 6 months. He said it was for private investor meetings, but..." She paused. The hotel confirmed Amber Hayes was registered as his guest each time. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because what he did at that shareholder meeting was wrong. And because I heard him on the phone with his lawyer 3 months ago, before any of this happened. He said, I need an exit strategy that protects the company assets. He's been planning this, Maya. He wanted to get rid of you in a way that made him look like the victim. I thanked Monica and immediately called Jennifer with this information. This changes things, Jennifer said. If we can prove he was planning the divorce before you received your diagnosis, his entire case falls apart. He's the one who's been fraudulent, not you. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for early December. I walked into that courthouse feeling like I might throw up. Derek was already there with his legal team, 3 attorneys in expensive suits. He didn't even look at me. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Walsh, reviewed the initial filings. Mr. Chen, you're seeking annulment based on fraudulent concealment of a medical condition. You claim your wife knew she had polycystic ovary syndrome before your marriage and deliberately hid this from you. Is that correct? Derek's lead attorney stood. Yes, Your Honor. My client entered into this marriage with the express understanding that children were a primary goal. Mrs. Chen's concealment of her condition constitutes material fraud. Judge Walsh turned to me. Mrs. Chen, how do you respond? Jennifer stood. Your Honor, my client was diagnosed with PCOS only 2 weeks before the shareholder meeting where Mr. Chen publicly humiliated her. She had no knowledge of this condition prior to her marriage. Furthermore, we have evidence that Mr. Chen has been planning this divorce for months, as part of a calculated strategy to remove my client from his life while protecting his assets, all while conducting an extramarital affair with a company employee. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Derek's face flushed red. These are serious allegations from both sides, Judge Walsh said. I'm setting a trial date for January 15th. Both parties will have the opportunity to present their evidence at that time. Court adjourned. As I left the courtroom, Derek caught up with me in the hallway. You're really going to drag this out? He said. You're going to lose, Maya. Just take the settlement I'm offering and move on. What settlement? You're offering me nothing. Exactly. Which is more than you deserve for wasting 3 years of my life. I looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered how I'd ever loved this man. I'll see you in court, Derek. The weeks leading up to trial were brutal. Derek's team tried every trick in the book. They subpoenaed my medical records going back 10 years, looking for any evidence I'd had symptoms before our marriage. They deposed my friends, asking if I'd ever mentioned fertility concerns. But Jennifer and her team were just as thorough. They subpoenaed Derek's medical records, too. They got the hotel records showing his meetings with Amber. They even found credit card statements showing Derek had purchased a diamond bracelet for someone 3 months ago, which I certainly never received. Then, 1 week before trial, Jennifer called me with news that made my heart stop. Maya, sit down for this. Our investigator found something in Derek's medical records. He had a vasectomy 4 years ago, 2 years before you even met. I couldn't breathe. What? He's been sterile this whole time. He's been shooting blanks while accusing you of being unable to have children. And he never told you. But why? Why would he do that and then marry me and talk about wanting children? Because he never wanted children, Maya. He wanted the image of a potential family to satisfy his investors and board members. You were the perfect accessory. Young, successful, attractive. But he never had any intention of actually having kids with you. I felt rage unlike anything I'd ever experienced. He'd let me believe there was something wrong with me. He'd humiliated me publicly, calling me barren, when he was the one who'd made sure he couldn't have children. There's more, Jennifer said. Amber Hayes is pregnant. My stomach dropped. What? She's 12 weeks along, and she's claiming Derek is the father. But if he had a vasectomy... Exactly. Either the vasectomy failed, which is rare but possible, or she's lying about him being the father, or she's been with someone else. Can we get a paternity test? We can certainly request one. But Maya, this gives us incredible leverage. Derek has been positioning himself as the wronged party who just wanted children with his wife. But he's the one who's been sterile all along, and now he's potentially involved in a pregnancy with another woman. His whole narrative falls apart. The trial began on a cold January morning. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and tech industry insiders who'd heard about the case. Derek took the stand first, playing the role of the heartbroken husband to perfection. I loved Maya, he said, his voice heavy with false emotion. I married her believing we'd build a life together, have a family. When I learned she'd been hiding a condition that made that impossible, I felt betrayed. Everything I'd built my future on was based on a lie. Jennifer's cross-examination was brutal. Mr. Chen, you testified that having children was important to you. Is that correct? Yes. And you claim my client betrayed you by not disclosing her PCOS diagnosis, correct? Yes. When did you have your vasectomy, Mr. Chen? The courtroom went dead silent. Derek's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Jennifer approached the bench with a document. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence medical records from Dr. Robert Kim, showing that Derek Chen underwent a vasectomy procedure on March 15th, 4 years ago, 2 years before he met my client. The judge examined the document. I'll allow it. Jennifer turned back to Derek. So let me get this straight. You had a vasectomy, making yourself permanently sterile 2 years before you met Maya. You then courted her, married her, and spent 3 years discussing having children with her, all while knowing you couldn't have children. And now you're accusing her of fraud for a medical condition she didn't even know she had until 2 weeks before you filed for divorce. Do I have that right? Derek's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The whole courtroom could see the truth written on Derek's face. Mr. Chen, Jennifer continued, isn't it true that you married my client not because you wanted a family, but because your investors and board members were pressuring you to appear more stable and family-oriented? No, Isn't it true that you never intended to have children with Maya, but you needed the appearance of working toward that goal to maintain investor confidence? That's not. And isn't it true that you've been having an affair with Amber Hayes, a 24-year-old employee at your company who is currently pregnant? The courtroom erupted. Judge Walsh banged her gavel. Order! Jennifer wasn't finished. Your Honor, I have here a sworn statement from Amber Hayes regarding the paternity of her unborn child. She's agreed to a paternity test. Would Mr. Chen like to consent to that test, or shall we wait for the court to order it? Derek's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we need a recess. During the recess, I sat in a small conference room with Jennifer, my hands shaking. We've got him, she said. He can't claim you defrauded him when he's been lying about his own fertility this whole time. And if that paternity test comes back showing he's not the father of Amber's baby, it's game over. The jury will see him for exactly what he is. When we reconvened, Derek's lawyer approached the bench for a private conference with Jennifer and the judge. After 10 minutes, they returned. Judge Walsh addressed the courtroom. The parties have agreed to a settlement. Mrs. Chen will receive 50% of all marital assets, including 50% of Mr. Chen's shares in Next Gen Solutions. The prenuptial agreement is hereby deemed invalid based on Mr. Chen's fraudulent concealment of his vasectomy. Additionally, Mr. Chen will pay Mrs. Chen's legal fees and $2 million in damages for emotional distress and public humiliation. This case is closed. I couldn't quite process what I was hearing. I'd won. Not just won, but thoroughly, completely won. As we left the courtroom, Derek tried to approach me one last time. Maya, Don't, I said. You're done talking. Jennifer handed him one more document. Oh, and Derek? The paternity test results just came back. You're not the father of Amber's baby. Might want to have a conversation with your girlfriend about that. I walked out of that courthouse with my head high. The reporters swarmed, but I didn't care. I'd been vindicated. The truth was out. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. I used my settlement to start my own marketing agency, Chen & Associates. The irony of keeping his last name for my business wasn't lost on me, but I'd earned that name through 3 years of hell. As for Next Gen, the scandal destroyed Derek's reputation. The board forced him out 3 months after the trial. They offered me a seat on the board given my ownership stake, but I declined and sold my shares back to the company at a premium. I wanted nothing more to do with Derek Chen or his empire. I focused on my business, on healing, on rebuilding my life. I started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of those 3 years. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. I even started dating again, though I was taking it very slowly. And then, at a charity fundraiser in June, I met Dr. Marcus Rivera. He was a fertility specialist, funny enough. We started talking about his work, and I found myself opening up about my PCOS diagnosis and everything that had happened. You know, he said gently, PCOS doesn't mean you can't have children. With the right treatment plan, many of my patients conceive naturally. And if that doesn't work, there are other options. You have choices, Maya. Don't let what he did take that hope away from you. We started seeing each other. Slowly at first, just coffee dates and long walks. He was kind, patient, and genuinely interested in who I was, not what I could do for his image or career. 8 months after the trial, he proposed. Not with a flashy public display, but privately, on a quiet beach at sunset. "I know you might not be ready," he said. "And that's okay. But I love you, Maya. Not for what you can give me, but for who you are. Whether we have children or not, whether we adopt or use fertility treatments or decide kids aren't for us, I just want to be with you." I said yes. We got married in a small ceremony 6 months later, just close friends and family. No press, no shareholders, no performance, just love. And here's the ending that still makes me smile every time I think about it. 3 months ago, I felt a familiar pain in my abdomen. But this time, it wasn't PCOS. This time, when I went to see Marcus at his clinic and he did an ultrasound, he got tears in his eyes. "Maya," he said, turning the screen toward me. "Look." There on the screen was a tiny flutter, a heartbeat. I was pregnant. Naturally pregnant despite PCOS, despite everything Derek had told me, despite all the doubt and shame I'd carried. I'm due in 3 months. A baby girl. Sometimes I think about Derek, wondering if he ever thinks about what he did. The last I heard, Next Gen was struggling under new leadership. Amber had married someone else, and Derek was dating a string of women young enough to be his daughters, still trying to prove something to the world. But I don't spend much time thinking about him anymore. I'm too busy living my actual life, running a successful business, planning for my daughter's arrival, being married to someone who actually loves me. The truth has a funny way of coming out, even when people try their hardest to bury it. And justice, real justice, tastes sweeter than any revenge ever could. My name is Maya Rivera. I'm 31 years old, and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.